Hello, and welcome to the Wade Borth Podcast. I'm your host, Wade Borth, and in every episode, my goal is to get you to think differently about how money works and ultimately to empower you to take control of your money and your personal financing system. Today, I have a special treat for everyone. I have Nicole Tate with me today. Nicole and I were introduced to each other through the Nelson Nash Institute, and we started working together over a number of years. And today we're going to talk a lot about the idea of mentorship and what that means. And just from the standpoint of one of my founding values, one of my founding beliefs is that the knowledge that we have, again, I believe that knowledge is within us all. The knowledge to do everything is within all of us. That's been given to us by God, and that's within us all. And part of a mentor, in my belief, is to help clear all the noise or clear all the weeds in our garden so the flowers that we have or the whatever we're growing in that garden can flourish. Our strengths, our true strengths can flourish. And so I had a mentor coming through this process. I was fortunate enough to have a mentor by the name of Nelson Nash. He guided me, and he wasn't always easy on me. Quite frankly, that was probably the best thing he could do for me, is he made me struggle a little bit, because the lessons I learned through those conversations, because he rarely ever just gave you a straight answer. He made you think. He made you engage your brain to think through a process. And so again, I was fortunate to have Nelson Nash as my mentor. And it's my belief that through that, we can make what we do and make a huge impact intergenerationally by mentoring others as well. One thing, at least my belief system, is if I could help 100 people, either agents or clients, understand what Nelson was saying, and then those 100 people could teach 100 people, we can reach so many more people. And help them take control of that financing function of their life, help them remove the bondage of indebtedness from their lives and take control of that function and find a better, more fulfilling life as they move forward. That's enough about me, but I want to introduce Nicole. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your journey through leading up to and into the whole idea of using infinite banking, would you?
Sure. I actually was introduced to infinite banking originally probably about 5 years ago. And at the time, the concept of whole life insurance just in general was a little bit foreign to me. I had some experience with it, but not a lot. And my first real introduction to infinite banking wasn't really what I thought it was. It was a client that had a whole life policy and had taken some loans from it and had never paid the loans back. And I just thought it was a terrible thing and not the best idea for this particular person. And it just sat there in my brain, but I kept hearing things about it from time to time. And then about a year ago, or a little longer than that ago, I got a random phone call from a person that specifically was looking for an infinite banking policy. And I had no idea how to help this person and no idea where to turn for information. And so that just opened up this process of exploring, what is this? Why does this guy want this? Why is he specifically looking for this type of policy? And why would he think it could help him? And so I went on a ravage of education trying to learn about it, and obviously came across the infinite banking concept website, and from there just said, I need to know about this. And that's where my learning started, but certainly not where it's ended.
Not where it's ended? Good. Nelson talks about the arrival syndrome. And I can share with all the listeners too that Nicole has been, I don't want to call you a student, because I'm a firm believer that I learned as much from you or more from you probably than you'll ever learn from me. So I've always appreciated that relationship with us and what we've done, because you always bring a different perspective, different thought. But tell us a little bit about what were some of the bigger aha moments just working together that you came across from even after you went through some of the training at the Infinite Banking Institute, and then what happened after that. I'm just curious what you found to be like, oh, I hadn't really thought of it that way, or this was like the big aha moments that you ran across.
I think one of the biggest things that you and I have worked on, and it took me just longer than I would have expected to wrap my head around it intuitively, but as a life insurance person, I always go back to the product. And so we've had multiple conversations about the fact that It's not about the product, it is the process. And so, really sinking my teeth into the fact that this is a process, and it isn't a process that lasts 1 month or 1 year. It's not a one time deal. It's a process that starts at whatever point it starts and it continues on through life. And if you can't wrap your head around that, it's really hard to understand how this fits into most people's world.
Yeah. I think I would agree with you 100%. Do you see that as a product of the conditioned thinking of the advertising of all the things that go on around us? Again, I call it noise or the weeds in our garden. How do you see that?
I definitely see it as a product of all of the noise that goes on around us, because the questions that always come back to me in the beginning are, can I do this in the market? Can I just do an investment? It's always around, there's some other way to do this besides this whole life policy. And the reality is there are other ways to do it, but there isn't anything that works quite as well or quite as efficiently. And if the conversation comes back to put my money in the market, then they don't understand what we're talking about at all.
And I just know, working with you, and I've seen the development and really in the blossoming of your garden from this knowledge standpoint, where my observation of just our conversations over, I don't even know how long we've been working together. It seems like 2 days, just because it's been so enjoyable. I look forward to our calls every week. But as those calls have progressed, you're right. We used to start probably every meeting and say, hey, Nicole, it's not about product, it's about process. And it took us a while, but
Yeah,
it's not, again, it's about years and years of being ingrained to think one way versus another. And so it takes us a while to unthink some of that language and some of that thought process. But as we've moved along, are you finding that there are people out there that really want to hear your message, hear what you're sharing? And I believe infant banking could work for everybody, but not everybody's receptive, at least right now, to what we're sharing. Would you agree with that?
yes, I would absolutely agree with that. And I do think that there's a segment of the population like me, like I was, when I heard this and when I began to read it and understand it a little bit more, I was like, why didn't I know about this? Why didn't I understand this earlier? Why did nobody ever tell me about this before? You have to go through an interview process to do the education piece with the infinite banking concept folks. And I can remember them asking me some questions, and I said to them, I felt like I was home again when I read this, because it just resonated so clearly with me. And nobody had to convince me. I gobbled it up and said, I want more. And I think there's a segment of the population out there that is just like that. They just don't know that there's another option out there besides what they've been told and what they've experienced through the banking system and through the stock market and through 401k plans and all of these things that everybody accepts as normal. To your point, it's how do you reach those people? And you said, if you can educate 100 people and they can educate 100 people, then you start widening that circle.
Exactly. I just a firm believer in that. And that is one of my passions, is to help. What Nelson had said to me when I first started working with him and I was thanking him for being there and for helping me. And he just says, I didn't teach you anything you didn't already know. You just became receptive to that message. And when you became receptive, that's when you started to grow. Seed can be cast on the ground, but until the ground is fertile and wet, it's not going to take that seed. So
Right.
I was closed to the idea until I opened myself up. And so that's the message I really try to get across to everybody I work with, either clients or agents, is that's the first step we have to do, is get ourselves to accept the possibility that there's something different, something better out there. And then once you open yourself to that, then the cracks start to form, and then those seeds can start finding a way down into our mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So, but how do you see what we've worked on together? How has it changed kind of your whole process, or how has it even changed your business? Just in general.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway that I've had is, if I had been left on my own without having you as a mentor, having a mentor at all, there is so much noise outside of this that I likely would have just put it on a shelf and walked away. So having the ability to bounce ideas off of you, to hear what your experiences were, to be able to share with you some of the things that have been said to me, some of the conversations that I've had, and you being able to put it into perspective and talk about bringing it back to this is a process and all of the knowledge and education that you've developed over the time that you've done this, it just fast tracked for me what probably would have taken months or years. So, from a mentorship perspective, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have a mentor. And I'm fortunate to have you as a mentor, but I certainly wouldn't be here today without you as a mentor because I didn't know what I didn't know. And although my mind was open and I was excited about hearing this, there's so much stuff out there that keeps filtering back in saying, no, this isn't how this works. This isn't how this works. It won't work that way. And so being able to learn and grow and become more adept at talking to clients and talking to prospective clients and sharing with them just the benefits and what I've learned, it wouldn't have happened without having a mentor.
Yeah. I felt the same way. There is a lot. Again, I'm that farm boy from North Dakota, right? So everything leads back to a garden or to the field. But there is a lot of weeds. Weeds will pop up before any fruit will in any garden or any field. So the weeds will pop up immediately. And those weeds are, to me, the doubts and the naysayers and the people that want you to not believe what you believe. They want you to believe what they believe too in order to reinforce their thought process. And those are, like I said, those are always the early weeds always pop up early. And it takes your vegetables, your fruits a little longer to get through there. So some of the times, at least how I always perceived what I try to do and what I try to assist in is to maybe help weed the garden as we go along until you can get your roots established. You can get up and going, and then you can start shading out those weeds that are creeping doubt and all the other things that people want you to believe. Because again, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a process of how to take control of the banking function in your life. What more valuable information can we share with people? But there's just a segment of the people that don't want to hear it just because, quite frankly, they don't want to do the time or the effort to go through that process and to actually think and engage their brain into that process.
Yeah, and I think there's always this idea of what is simple is not always easy, and what is easy is not necessarily always simple. And the concept is very simple, but the process of putting it into place and letting it grow over years is not necessarily easy.
And what do you think that is? Why do you say it's not easy? Because I would agree, it is. It's the simple. There's an old saying this is simple, don't make it difficult. But you're right, it's simple, but it isn't necessarily easy. And any thoughts on why it's not easy for people? I have a couple thoughts I'll share, but I'll let you shoot first.
I think the first thought is really that it just flies in the face of conventional wisdom. And I can remember going to the bank, going to the AF&B bank with my mom when I was a little kid, and we opened up an account, and everything always happened at the bank. We went to the bank and the bank gave me a sucker. I didn't even like suckers, but the bank gave me a sucker. And so when we had money, we took it to the bank and we put it there. And it just becomes an ingrained concept that the bank is where you put money and the bank is where you go to ask for money. And when you say, what if you became your own banker? People look at you like, I don't even know how that works. I don't even know what you mean by that.
Yeah. And I think for the audience, just and the people that are listening, you're 100%. That is what they do. And I think there's an important distinction that we have to separate the traditional banking process, which is transaction of money, versus what I would almost consider this demon, which is the modern day banking system. So I think there's a difference between the two, and everybody has a tendency to want to put them together. And again, I'm not against banks, right? So if somebody wants to go and make a deposit in the bank and hold some money there and have a relationship and have coffee at the bank, that's great. But the process of banking should really be done at the you and me level. The idea that I only have one place to go, and that's the bank if I want to buy a piece of equipment or buy a piece of real estate or whatever the case might be. And there's a tendency, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head, is that we from a very young age, we've been conditioned to think that there's just one place, just this one place. And we've gone there as young people and we've been told to start a bank account and start saving. What we haven't been taught to do is, like Nelson talks in his book, is like money like water has to flow. And nobody in a bank teaches you that. They do it all the time. They practice that all the time, but nobody there teaches you that your money has to flow. And so I find that rather interesting how you see that. And because it's so true, there's so many people that have just always imagined that their bank is out there to look out for them. It's a second home, as it were. Like you said, they gave you suckers and they made you feel comfortable there.
Yeah. And we've had a lot of conversations around that idea that money has to flow. And I will tell you that I never, ever heard that before I was introduced to IBC. Never heard that.
Yeah.
It was a totally new concept. It makes sense to me now, but I think that most of the average people out there have never heard that concept either. They don't even know what that means.
Yeah. And why would they? And to your point, Nelson even said this too. He was angry when he first discovered this whole idea of borrowing into his life insurance policy and this whole idea behind privatized banking or whatever you want to call it. He said he was angry. He says, why did people hide this from me? And why did I know about it earlier? That was the same reaction you had. But again, why would they tell you? Why would they tell you what your secret sauce is? They want you coming back to the restaurant. Why would they teach you how to cook the food that you love so much? Because they're profitable off of it. So they have no incentive to teach you why this makes sense.
Yeah. And I think a lot of them don't understand it either.
No, but all the banks practice it. They take in money from you, lend it out to, other people, and they have a markup and they have no money in the game on that. So anyhow, that's probably for a different podcast. We can talk about that in the future. But again, the focus here is just wanting to talk about mentorship. And I just, like I said, I appreciate Nicole. I've appreciated our conversations every week. And again, I think it's a good match, a good relationship. We both grow from that. And I can tell you, I've grown tremendously from our conversations.
I appreciate that too. And you made a comment that when Nelson was mentoring you, that he didn't always make it easy on you, that he would challenge you and push you a little bit. And I think that's one of the big benefits of having a mentor is that you have somebody that pushes you a little bit, challenges you a little bit, makes you think more for yourself. But at the same time, can impart on you wisdom. So when you go astray, they can say, let's come back to what we're trying to accomplish here. Let's come back to what we're working on here. And I'm glad to hear that you feel like it's a back and forth relationship, that it's mutually beneficial, because as part of mentoring, so you mentoring me, hopefully at some point I will be able to mentor somebody else in this, and I would want to be able to have the back and forth and learn from them the way that you've indicated that you've learned some things from me as well. I think that's important with mentorship, that it's a two-way street. It shouldn't just be one way.
Well, it's like I said, if you're, and I know you are fully engaged. You always bring your A game to our conversations, struggles and all. But that's the point, right? Really, mentorship isn't to tell you how to do something. A mentorship, at least in my mind, is to show you, put up some guardrails so we don't go off the rail, don't go off the road. But it's just like teaching somebody to drive. You can't hold the wheel all the time for people. You have to let them, make their own corrections, as it were. But again, it's about that guidance, giving that advice along the way. Waiting. Sometimes I wait for you to ask me for advice versus me just letting it go out there. And then, because then it's important enough that you're asking. So there's all that give and take. And I've learned a lot just in how to interact with people that are coming along the way. So sometimes we have a tendency to think that everybody's where we're at in our knowledge base. And I have to remember, oh no, I was in your shoes at one time. I actually made a comment to Nelson one time. He goes, this is simple. This is easy. And I made a comment to him. I said, driving a car is easy now. But I said, it was hard, very hard when I first got behind the wheel of our old farm truck to learn how to drive. But now it's almost instinctive. But I do remember those days learning how to drive. You pop the clutch and you kill the motor and you start over again. And so anyhow, that's the whole process, is that we have to also bring ourselves back to the shoes that we're in, because I think you've progressed so far that I could see you starting to work and teach others as you go along. And you're teaching others, you're teaching your clients, you're teaching hopefully other agents, because again, you are one of those 100 that I'm reaching out to. So now you can go teach 100 as well. So I do appreciate that.
One of the other things that I think is interesting about a mentorship relationship, and this has definitely been the path that I've been on, that as I'm working with people or as I'm having struggles or I'm thinking about, I don't really understand how this works, always what pops into my head is, I need to talk to Wade about this to get some perspective from you. What do you think? This is what I heard, or this is where I'm struggling. And so it just makes it so much easier to go through this process and continue to learn and grow by just having personal conversations. Here's what happened. Here's what my questions are. What is your input?
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember those conversations with Nelson, and not just him, other practitioners, even my peers. And that's part of the reason why we belong to think tanks or we belong to mastermind groups, is because we do get challenged during a thought process. And if we don't have anybody kind of to fall back on, you lose that confidence. Am I thinking correctly? And we just have nobody to help sharpen our sword, as it were, or at least to put up a shield so we can now start thinking, okay, let's think through that process. So again, I've been there. I know exactly what you're saying. Is I got to speak to somebody about this because somebody's challenged me and I haven't been able to think about what they're saying. And then once I've had a chance to think about it, I'm like, yeah, I'm still confident when I believe. And here I find their flaw in their argument. And until you've actually experienced that, until you've actually skinned your knees, I think I use that term all the time, is you gotta get out and skin your knees a little bit. You don't know what people are going to say to you that are going to challenge you, but it is super nice to be able to fall back on it. Hey, I was told this. What do you guys think about that? Or Nicole, what do you think about that if you were my mentor? And it just gives us that kind of that life vest, as it were, that we always have on, and we don't feel like we're going to drown.
Can I throw a question your direction?
Always. Go ahead.
Do you think, other than the definitional difference, that there's a difference between coaching and mentorship?
My belief is coaching is typically a one-way street. It's
Okay,
imparting
that's what I
knowledge.
was sort of thinking. I'm thinking because I used to coach swimming, and yeah, you're right. It is a one way. There's feedback from the person that's being coached, but it is here's how you do it, and this is what I want you to do now, as opposed to mentorship where there's a real sharing of ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, and I see mentorship more as a partnership, as it were. And nothing wrong with coaching. I used to coach basketball and some other sports. I participate in coaching and I love being able to teach. But mentorship is more of to me, again, this is my definition. It's more of a meshing of equals, not so much in essence, a coach and athlete versus that to me isn't of equals, but a mentorship is more of a meshing of equals. You are very successful in your business, as it were, but you're changing your thoughts and you needed somebody to help, mold those thoughts and bring those thoughts all together because they're already out there. Again, that infinite knowledge is within all of us. And so you're out there just trying to grow it and you're saying, I just need a little help getting ahead of these weeds. And so my job is, at least what I thought, was to come in and help that. So that's how I see it as mentorship, is more of that relationship of equals versus that imparting of knowledge between a coach and the athlete.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But so now the plan is, what are you going to do for future mentorship? Who are you going to reach out to? You don't have to answer that today, but
Yeah,
just
that's
give
a
that
good
a thought.
question. That's
Because as you go forward, again, I saw it as my mission. People helped me along the way. A tremendous amount of people helped me along the way. So what am I doing to help even more people along their way as well? And hopefully that's your mission. I just from our conversations, I know that's your mission. So it's probably not fair for me to set that up the way I did, but I see that in you. I believe that's really where you're headed. And just let you know, you're well on that path. You embrace the idea, and those opportunities will find you when the time is right.
Yeah, and I hope that as I grow into that role, that somebody like me comes along that's hungry for knowledge, that I can do what you've done, which is really help expand my mindset and keep things in the right perspective, come back to what the long game is, and just really help them grow and enjoy the process. So it's been really enjoyable working with you. I look forward to every of the calls that we have, and I hope that I can impart that on more than one person, on lots of people down the road.
Yeah, I'm confident you will as well. Again, thank you, Nicole. Thank you for the energy. Thank you for the commitment of doing all the things you say you're going to do. And I think that's probably the recipe for a good mentorship, is bringing energy, bringing the openness to learn and to share and push back and challenge me as well. Those are all great aspects of a good relationship. And so I've always appreciated our relationship. And again, as I see you grow, I see you mentoring and leading a whole group of people that, again, we can make this thing grow exponentially. I'm a firm believer in that.
Thank you, Wade, and thanks for asking me to do this. I appreciate it. It's a good
You bet. So, if you're enjoying this podcast or know anyone else that might be interested, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and please leave a review. This will help this podcast reach and help more people by ranking higher in searches, and ultimately help more people get out of financial bondage. And don't be afraid to share this podcast with your friends